Hello and welcome back everybody to the Foodbuild factory, where today we're going to take a look at the Firebreather, which is the character you can see on screen right now. And contradictory to the characters we've shown off so far, this guy is going to rely on 3 different classes of weapons, which is the thing that's going to make him special. So, first of all, we're going to use a fire axe as a melee weapon. This weapon will completely be unspec'd, so it simply deals damage through its legendary effect, and secondly through our high base damage through strength. So the other thing we're going to use is a bloodied harpoon gun, as you can see here on screen. And the last thing we're going to use, which is going to be our primary weapon dealer when it comes to, well, pretty much anything that the other 2 weapons aren't exceedingly good at, is going to be this here bloodied Vet's hit chance 45 SMG with the Scorched Killer mod equipped. So it's a receiver that for some strange reason really exceeds in fire rate compared to the standard receivers, and that's what making it special. So for those of you who don't know, you can get the Scorched Killer receivers after finishing the, or I'm not even sure if you have to finish the questline for the Firebreathers completely, but after joining them you can download the plans for those receivers from a terminal within the fire department. So the fact you don't know a lot about them maybe is that they're not exceedingly good, to be honest. Like, usually what they do is they do 50% more damage towards scorched enemies, and I think it is 20 or 30% less to everything else, which sounds like a very stupid idea. Well, it's not even that stupid, especially if you're not following a certain build. It can be worth it to carry 1 weapon with this equipped only to deal with Scorch Beasts, but for some strange reasons, when you mod the 45 SMG with this receiver, its fire rate goes way up. So in terms of DPS, it might actually be better than to use the hardened receiver for this weapon, simply because you're spewing out bullets so fast. I mean, you will see it later in the gameplay, but as for now, well, as you can see here, even the sounds, it's crazy. I think it might even be fast enough to proc some of the magic effects in the game, but I can't tell for sure. If so, this weapon would be magic, but it doesn't seem like it. It's just that high fire rate makes the DPS go very high. So anyways, we're just going to follow the road down here a little bit, and I'm trying to show off all of the weapons in the meantime. So you already seen the fire axe in action and the SMG. So in terms of gameplay, you're very good at sneaking, and it's a good idea to stay in stealth as long as possible. Well, in this case, we got detected because I didn't really pay attention all that much. I didn't know that there was a random spawn here. Well, anyways, we're back there in a minute. So, as I said earlier, this is a stealth character, first and foremost. And surprisingly, even the harpoon gun works relatively well with stealth, as long as you keep your range. So what you're going to do is, your day-to-day weapon will be this here SMG. If enemies are spread out fairly evenly, you're using your fire axe. So for example, if you're on the golf course in White Spring, what you want to do is, you're probably going to clear the main building with the SMG, as it's just a bit more efficient. But once you enter the the rooms with 2 or 3 ghouls inside, you can definitely use the fire axe to kill them off. That's simply to spare ammo. So we're using 45 ammo, which isn't particularly hard to come by, but the problem is that due to our high fire rate, you can burn through them quite fast, especially if you were to only use that weapon as a main, the SMG. That could lead to problems pretty easily. So another thing to say about this build, the nice thing is you can really switch between using wets or not, simply because our special stats from our unyielding armor are so high that you are efficient in wets even though you're not really spec'd into it. But as I said, you're not spec'd into it, and therefore you can really use free aim as much as you like. So overall the strength with this build is versatility. And what you're going to see or what you're going to encounter when using this build is it really has this kind of old school Fallout feel to it. Like, I'm not talking Fallout 1 old school. I'm talking about Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, mostly. Simply because in those games, well, as you had skills, you just invested into small weapons, for example, and overall, it felt like you were using a wider armory than you are usually doing in Fallout 76. So in Fallout 76, your standard practice is to go for one, maybe two weapon types. So it's not a problem if you know about it, but it can honestly feel a bit restricting in some way. So for those of you who really want to walk around like a walking armory, first and foremost, Bloodied is the way to go, simply because your base damage will be so high with Bloodied weapons that you're pretty much better than someone who just spec'd into weapons but uses non-legendary versions, or maybe even Furious or something. So the high base damage really makes it so you can use every weapon you can get your hands on in a Bloodied way. And especially melee weapons tend to still be strong even though you're not investing into them, simply because your strength is very high. It's somewhere over 20, I think it's 25, 26 or something like that. So that's all straight up damage boosts if you think about it. So simply from your strength alone, you're pretty much as invested as a non-legendary melee user would be with full perks. And furthermore, we are going to use stealth to our advantage, so you can double that initial hit, which on a fire axe, which we're using, is already very high, simply because the weapon has a very high base damage. And therefore I found the only thing that might be worth investing is maybe martial artists, simply so that our attacks can go quicker, but it's not necessary. Time isn't the problem, simply because we're sneaking. As you can see here, we're not in a hurry, so as long as we're playing to the strength of our build, the fact that we're not spec'd into melee weapons doesn't hinder us all that much. And it really takes some kind of adjustment and in terms of your gameplay to get into the build. So I feel like switching between two different weapons isn't a problem at all, but when it comes to three weapons, you really have to think about what you're using in which situation. And you will quickly see that you find out pretty quickly which situation which weapon will exceed. So another thing is, as long as situations like this exist, where smaller groups of enemies are spread out fairly evenly, the harpoon gun is a good choice, for the simple reason that it's quite ammo efficient. So you're using one harpoon per enemy usually. When there is an enemy where you would need more than one harpoon, you're probably better off using the SMG, simply for the high fire rate. and not even can you get harpoons back from time to time. That's not the big selling point here. The point is that they're quite easy to craft. You just need some wood, steel, and I think the most expensive part would be adhesive. So, well, that says everything, I think. Adhesive isn't that expensive in this game. It's quite common, and especially in higher levels, you can even make an adhesive farm. Some of you may already know that, or still know that from Fallout 4. So I didn't have all that much harpoons on me, but I just needed for this quick run. But if you're having like 50 to 100 harpoons, they're going to last a while. Let's say it like that. So furthermore, what can I say about the build? Well, I do really love the aesthetic. The good thing about it is, as you are playing a Firebreather, so you can simply use the Firebreather uniform if you're not having a matching set of unyielding armor. But I personally found that shadowed metal armor really works well, especially we're having heavy legs here. I think it's a heavy torso and sturdy arms. Heavy arms work very well also, but even the light versions do work quite well. So I think they really go with the color of the helmet that you can get from the quest line, and it really catches this feeling of the Firebreathers that they are this reinforced, well, firefighters. By the way, I'm just looking around here and I see that enemies seem to... Oh yeah, okay. Now we're seeing some with higher levels again. I thought I had to stop the video here. But as you can see here, Mr. Gutsy's, they are fairly tough enemies, you can say. And provided I'm going to hit them, of course, we're having no trouble at all. Also, as you can see here, the accuracy with our harpoon gun is very good if we're going for the torso, which is enough. So this enemy here is bugged, as you can see. I did hit him 2 times and he just regenerates health, which is a shame, but I think... Yeah, now we got him. I think that his health pool was bugged. I can't say for sure, but well... yeah, sneak attacks from the harpoon gun are devastating. In fact, your biggest problem, at least with my harpoon gun, which does extra VETS crit damage, is that you're going to see rubber banding on, especially on Scorch Beast, I found. If I shoot them with VETS crits, somehow the server can handle it, and you end up doing pretty much no damage to no damage at all. But as long as you're just using stealth attacks without VETS, it's not a big problem at all. So as you saw here, it can happen, but in those cases, remember you have 2 different weapons you can use. What else can I say? Well, we're soon getting into the build. As for mutations, this build is pretty... Well, you can do whatever you want, actually. Like, the standard mutations like Marsupial are quite good. You're going to sneak a lot, so the Bird Bones mutation is quite beneficial to you for the high agility. Obviously, you can think about using that or not, simply because you can need all the strength, or you can use all the extra strength for your melee attacks. It's pretty much a matter of finding out what kind of playstyle you're going for the most. So if you find yourself using the melee attacks a lot, it might be beneficial to not use Bird Bones, but I'm going over the mutations later on. Thing I wanted to say here is just that there's not a single mutation we desperately need. So I think we had quite a fair mixture of enemies here, so you can have a pretty good idea of how the build works. So I think that's it for the gameplay, and we're probably going to take a look at the build now. So let's get into it. First things first, our effects. Here you can see our mutations. We have Adrenal Reaction, this is mandatory, I forgot to mention that. We're a bloody build at under 20% health, so we're constantly benefiting from this mutation. Bird Bones, Eagle Eyes, Egghead, well, those three are pretty much just my way to increase my perceptions, agility and intelligence. So none of these are necessary, so they're just a bit for convenience. Especially Egghead is just there so I can make more XP while killing enemies, and Bird Bones, it does help with your stealth abilities. But these three all come with negatives to our strength, so arguably they're not worth it. So you will see here on our specials, our strength is a 12, which is enough, coupled with the bloodied effect. But if you were to cut those three mutations, Birdbone, Eagle Eyes and Egghead, your damage output with the Fire Axe would be significantly higher. So that about that. Heating factor, it's still a leftover from an older build. You don't need that at all, it's just for the flavor. So I wouldn't recommend using it especially, but there's not a big reason not to use it either. You're not using chems all that much, so the only negative you get basically is for stealth for Stimpaks. And as you're at low health anyways, you don't really need all that much benefits from Stimpaks. Marsupial, well, you know the thrill by now. Marsupial is for bigger jump height and carry weight, with the only downside of less intelligence, so it's pretty much a staple of most builds. And Speed Demon, well, always a good pick, even if you're not using weapons that need reload, but yeah, what should I say, it's a good choice every time. So onto the build itself. We do have a base strength of 11, which we use for 3 times Expert Heavy Gunner. So what I didn't mention so far is that you won't see heavy gunners outside of power armor all that much, because you don't have stabilized when you're not in power armor. What does stabilized? It increases your armor penetration and your accuracy, especially your hipfire accuracy with heavy weapons when you are in power armor, but both of these aren't really all that necessary for us when we're talking about the harpoon gun, which is the heavy gun we use. Because the harpoon gun, well, we use it with a scope, so we don't hipfire with it at all, so that's not a problem for us. And the high base damage, extremely high base damage of the weapon makes it so armor penetration isn't the problem either. So in this case, stabilized wouldn't do us that much of a favor anyways, so that's why I went for the harpoon gun. Also, I feel it kind of works aesthetically for a fire breather. We're not using faster reload or bare arms either, simply because we're only carrying one weapon, which we can justify with our high carry weight capacity. And the faster reload, well, there's a thing about the harpoon gun where basically how fast you can shoot is kept. So even if you can reload the weapon faster, it's going to take a few seconds before you can, or not a few seconds, but it takes a bit of time before you can actually shoot. So there's no point in investing into reload perks. So if you're running Speed Demon, I think that's you're already at maximum speed you can fire the harpoon gun, except if you're having a quad one, but that's a different story. Bandolier, well, this time I actually would recommend you to use it, simply because you're carrying a lot of ammo, and especially the harpoons. If you want to have a large supply of them, they can get very heavy quite fast. So Bandolier, not a bad pick here. Onto perception, we do have 10 base perception, which is way higher due to our mutations and our unyielding. But as for perks, we do have 3 ranks of commando perks maxed out, and 1 rank of concentrated fire, which won't really increase our damage or VET's accuracy while firing, but we use it simply so we can target heads if we want to. So as I said earlier, you can fairly easily switch between VETs and using manual aim. So if you find yourself not using VETs all that much, you can easily use this one perk point and put it somewhere else in the build. You still have enough perception so you can land the occasional VETs torso shot if you want to, but as I said, if you're not using VETs, feel free to use this perk point somewhere else. Probably strength would be a good choice, or endurance. Onto endurance, we do use a dense chest piece, that's why I don't use fireproof here. So with fairly low endurance of 4, Life Giver is a good choice, simply so we have a bit more health, especially when we're at 20% of it. And as I said, fireproof isn't needed because of the torso modification we do have for our armor. If you don't have access to the dense, or I think padded is another choice, armor on your chest piece, you should really use fireproof here, and maybe 1. I think the minimum for Life Giver is 2. Well, feel free to use whatever you want. I went for Life Giver here, but there's not a wrong choice, honestly. Onto Charisma, we have Lone Wanderer, which first of all fits our build quite well, and 30% less damage, the 20% less damage is really significant for our character. And furthermore, I do think the Lone Wanderer perk card fits the Firebreather kind of well, simply because they died out, and you're kind of this... You don't see guys in Firebreather helmets all that much throughout the game, so you are basically a Lone Wanderer if you're going to represent that faction. Onto Intelligence, I do have batteries included, and Nerd Rage and First Aid here. So Nerd Rage, this is a given. We're playing a bloodied character, so under 20% health you gain 40% damage resistance and 20% damage and 15 AP regen. This is always in effect with our character, and it's a staple of our build, so you definitely want that. Differently, these 2 perks here. So I do have 1 rank of First Aid and 3 ranks of batteries included, for the simple reason that I do need batteries included in order to walk. I do have tons of energy ammo on me, so I can live without it, sadly. And First Aid, well, it mitigates the negatives from our from my health regen mutation, but I just picked it simply because I had 1 perk point left here that I wanted to spend. And ideally what you want here is 4 ranks of gunsmith, so your weapons degrade a bit less, or you could even throw in explosive, so the demo expert perk, in order to get even more versatility with your build. So you can throw some grenades here and there, and even use a missile launcher if you wish. That would be a great idea and would honestly be a lot of fun. But yeah, Nerd Rage is necessary here. The other 4 points are up to you, actually. So agility, I went for 12, which is unusual for a sneak build. Usually you want 15 agility. But due to the way that we want to use 3 different weapons in this game, with this build, we did really have to manage our special points and had to make compromises here and there, which is the reason why you rarely see people utilize multiple weapon classes. But due to our unyielding armor, we will still have a lot of agility, so it won't be a problem at all. We do have rank 2 of Action Boy, rank 3 Through Hiker. Yeah, you know the thrill, it's a convenience perk, use whatever you want here. I had to use it to walk. Covered Operative, I think this is a really good choice. Simply your sneak attacks with ranged weapons do more damage, and especially your SMG really benefits from it. Even the harpoon gun, I mean, it's more than powerful enough on its own, simply because of the high base damage, but even further boosting its sneak attack damage through Covered Operative makes it a devastating weapon. Sneak and Escape Artist, well, those are self-explanatory simply because we're always in stealth, so these two perks are pretty much necessary. On to Luck. 3 ranks of Bloody Mass, 3 ranks of Serendipity. This one is another mandatory pick here. We really need it for our build to work if we get detected, so we're not dead in the first shot. And Storage Genes, so nothing special there. You could really think about not using Bloody Mass. Your damage output will be high enough, and use something else if you wish, but I figured, especially with the damage output for my Fire Axe, this was a good choice. Honestly, it's never a bad choice, so feel free to use something else if you want to and if you feel like you can afford it, but it's up to you, honestly. So overall, gotta say, that was it, but I just remembered to show you the equipment here. Then it's over. We have a metal chest piece with poison resistance and reduced fall damage. It's unyielding. The poison resistance is very nice when fighting Mirelurk Queens or something like that. An arm piece, another unyielding piece with radiation resistance, then a 1-star unyielding arm, one of the legs which has increased action point refresh, and well, we can breathe underwater, but it's not like we ever going to use that. And yet again, unyielding, exactly like the last one. It's a 1-star unyielding too. So as you see here, nothing spectacular. So the individual pieces are, with the exception of maybe the one with AP refresh, they're all pretty basic and cheap. So every single one of them could be purchased for 1 to 2k probably in player vendors. It just takes a bit of time to gather the individual pieces, especially if you want to have all of them in the heavy variety or sturdy or something like that. But well, that's about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed the build, and I'll see you next time, guys. Have fun. Bye.